Hello and welcome to a massive edition of the Tongue Tie Off podcast on the pacesetters.au network. My name's Cody Winnell. As always, I'm joined by Jason Bonington. G'day, Jace.
Hello, Coates. I messaged you. I don't know whether Lockie McIntyre. He's a very smart guy.
Lockie, that was cool, wasn't it?
It was a big race. Was it Tuesday night?
Yeah. The Gus Underwood, was it?
Is a man you would know very well, Gus Underwood, who's a great journo like yourself. And he was talking about him getting a new pacemaker, and he said pace setter, and then paused. And I just felt like he was talking to us, and he was giving us a plug. Am I wrong?
It felt like that. He said, yeah, he's getting a new pace setter, pacemaker, and we didn't pay Lockie for that. So we should welcome Greg Sugars, our guest for the night, J-Bon, champion raceman Greg Sugars. G'day, Greg.
G'day, guys. How are you?
Yeah, going all right. J-Bon, you going all right?
I'm going all right. I was a little bit worried about Gregory just before we came on. I saw him before he could see me, and he can only see me and not you now. So it's a confusing situation. But he was just I won't say he had frog-like tendencies. Just leaning back, there was a little bit of a double chin, and I just thought, Greg, if you can't do this, it's okay. Just go and look after yourself.
Sounds like he was doing a Paul Oxenford imitation of when Paul used to pretend to be driving a horse down at the pub.
No, Paul wouldn't
leaning back.
Been told he has a double chin. Now Greg's
There's
pretty
a lot of
vain.
pressure. There's a lot of pressure here coming on here. I was just sort of preparing myself mentally and physically to make sure I'm sort of up to the task.
Now, this is a dangerous question to ask. Reg, Candyman, have you watched a couple?
Have I what?
Watched a couple of episodes. Have you?
Actually, I haven't. I haven't tuned in. So this is a new experience for me.
Brilliant. We're a bit casual here, Greg. It's a bit. J-Bon's got the singlet on.
He's light on for time, Greg. He's got no time to.
On with the suits.
He's watching a new show called Sneaky Pete. He's got no time to
exactly
take in the podcast. That's
Sneaky Pete. Sneaky Pete feet. What was that pacer called? I can't remember now. Freaky Feet. Pete, was that a famous pacer?
I vaguely remember something along those lines, but yeah, no, can't help you out, mate.
We're off to a really, really strong start tonight on Pace Setters. Hey, there's a lot happening in Victorian harness racing at the moment, Greg. A lot of it on the positive side of things, a lot of it on the negative side of things. Let's start with the positive side of things, and that is, I think the run Lara J Farm is having at the moment is absolutely sensational. You must be thrilled with how the team's going, how your form is. There's a couple of horses we wanted to touch on. I guess firstly, Harry, aka Just Believe. What a fantastic return from the trotter this last week.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, it's we've had quite an amazing last sort of couple of seasons, and he's probably been the headline act, obviously, and this year's sort of continuing on quite well, and great to have him back. Won at the races, but in winning form, of course.
I'm pretty upset that Greg hasn't been watching, because we had a chat last week. Your protege of sorts, the Love Bug, Jimmy Herbertson's obviously he's reaching new levels. He's peaking Everest. And Cody went out. I'm going to throw you under the bus here, Codes. Code said, has he taken over? Is he like, he was comparing the Love Bug with you, Greg. And I just said, what are you doing for?
No, well, it was off the back of, I think,
in his early 50s. Like,
you were pretty gushy too.
25 years to be at that level.
J-Bon, you were pretty gushy too, and I just made the point. It sounds, we'd have to run the replay, but it sounds as though, I think I even said, are you suggesting that he's gone past Greg Sugars?
Well, I just thought the funniest part of it back in the day, Gregory, was I said to the Love Bug, I really feel like you are very similar. You're heading in the same path as a driver to Gregory. And he said, well, I sort of never had Greg as one of my... But you two are good mates, and you'd be very happy with the way he's going.
Oh, absolutely. No, he's a great kid, just off the track, and what he's been able to do on the track, especially over the last sort of couple of seasons, is quite remarkable. I think, yeah, when you see him out there and the way he approaches things and how sort of professional he is, yeah, probably forget that how young he is and the future he's got ahead of him. So, no, yeah, he's yeah, pretty close to Jess and myself, and yeah, we have a lot of time for Jimmy, and yeah, we're very proud of what he's been able to achieve, and we're happy to help him along and get him to drive a few of our horses when he's available.
Do you mind revealing your vintage at the moment? You don't have to. It's a woman's prerogative not to.
No, I'm 39. I'll be 40 pretty soon.
The
That's
big
when you
4-0.
can start calling people in their 20s, mid to late 20s.
He covers tons of Ks, doesn't he, James Herbertson? He'll go anywhere for a winner. He'll go anywhere for a drive. Still, he must clock up the Ks, Greg.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, you know, I've certainly slowed down on in that side of things over the last couple of years, and as our team here's built up, sort of more focused on preparing them and driving them. But yeah, I did it for quite some time myself, and it takes a toll. It's not easy. A lot of people sit back and will see what James is doing right now, and see him winning so many races and think, wow, this kid's flying, but he must have a great life. They don't realise the sacrifices he makes, and you know how much travel is involved. It's yeah, you know, when you're out there doing that, you earn every win you get. There's no doubt about it.
It's worth asking you this publicly. I've asked you privately before, Gregory, but in the entire game, those who do the best are the very best drivers. You've been at the top of the tree for a long time, but for some ungodly reason, drivers want to be trainers. Now, tell me why you and Jess decided when, you know, you're making extraordinary coin. I don't think I've ever got a lend off you, but it's always in the back of my mind that it's possible because you're a rich man. Why move from this incredibly lucrative part of the sport to a much more difficult, less lucrative part of the sport? I mean, you're flying, but I think people would just like to know. You've done it. Chris Alford's done it. Gav, Craig Demler, plenty of great drivers have gone, I'll tell you what, I want to be a trainer. Is it just something that you want to see what you can achieve as a trainer? Part of it is owning the land, obviously, because you know that then I am going to get a land because there's millions involved, I suppose. But what's the impetus for that?
Yeah, look, hard to pinpoint it exactly how we've sort of ended up in this situation because, you know, probably if you had asked me this question or asked me if this was going to happen when I was at probably the stage that Jimmy Herb's at right now, I would have said it was the furthest thing from my mind. There's no way I'd ever sort of commit myself to a team of horses. But yeah, somewhere along the way, I've always liked being involved in a stable. Obviously, training with Dad, and now training with Jess. And I think you probably get to that stage where you need a new challenge. It's certainly more satisfying when you've you know, built a horse into something that can go out there and win a race, especially if it's a good race. There's so much more goes into the training side of things, and I think there's probably a bit more self-satisfaction of a job well done than just jumping on someone else's horse and winning a good race, even though that's still very thrilling and something I really enjoy doing, like even these days, if it's not one of ours here. There's no doubt about that, but there's certainly a fair bit more satisfaction and pride goes into winning races on horses that you've prepared from day one.
Greg, two horses I want to ask you about is I want to firstly ask about He's From Heaven, who is just stringing a magnificent winning picket fence streak together at the moment and was an amazing win, I thought, last weekend. Got into some trouble there and lost a stack of ground, but somehow picked up and won the race and beat a pretty smart little field. So that must have been really thrilling. And then the other one that I'll ask you about is a girl that I'm absolutely in love with in Rakero Rebel. I just think she's an absolutely fantastic mare. I've made the point on this podcast. I know you haven't watched it previously, Greg, but I've made the point time and again that I think she can be the best pacing mare in Australia in the next 12 months. I think she can be right up there. And if not among the top two or three,
he won't agree. He won't say that. He won't agree with you.
She can be potentially number one. So what about those two paces?
Yeah, well, firstly, He's From Heaven. Yeah, he is building up a very exciting record at the moment. He was a real headache problem child horse when he first arrived here at Lara J Farm, and it's taken quite some time to sort of iron him out and sort of get him relatively tractable, and now his ability shining through. But he certainly showed early days that he had, probably above average ability, but his manners weren't there. But I think every start this preparation, every run, he's shown improvement. So how much more is left in him improvement wise is a little bit hard to know, but looking forward to getting him through the next month or two of racing, and then he can have a good break, and hopefully he turns into a really nice 4-year-old, and we can target some pretty handy races with him, because Jess and I've got a fair bit of time for him. And as for the mare, Rebel, she's done an amazing job this time around. She got off to a bit of a rocky start with us as well, and had a few little issues go wrong when she first arrived here. But now she's 5-year-old and mature sort of mare. She's really come to her own and into her own. And the sectionals she can carve out, they're pretty impressive. And a few of the, obviously the headline act in the mares ranks in Victoria, Ladies in Red, sort of retired now, so that probably makes life a little bit easier. But there is quite a few nice fillies and mares that are making their way through the grade, so it's not going to be easy at the top end. Whether she's going to be the top of the tree, I'm not so sure about that, but she's certainly going to be competitive if nothing goes wrong in the mares races for the the next season or two, I think.
You're not joining us for the form segment because you don't know anything about form, I'm told. Like you just go out there and
Not a thing.
It's all just done on feel.
Correct.
He's got really thick fingers, and he just, but they're full of nerves. He just knows exactly. Leading with Rakero Rebel on Saturday night.
Yeah, I think so. That's for Greg.
Coach.
My bad.
I appreciate your opinion, to be honest, mate. But I'll tell you what.
Oh, apparently I am.
Driving.
Yeah, apparently that's the plan. So we'll press forward, I think, and make use of the draw over probably the two main dangers. She has a great gate speed. Whether we hold it or not, I'm not committing to that at this point in time. We'll just play that by ear. But we know she's very quick opposite, but she's raced very well in front too. So we've got options.
So Codes believed. I'll tell you what, Codes. I'm not sure based on what I just said. He believes she's got the depth as well. But when you use her off the gate, we know how quickly she can finish, last 400, 600, 800 metres. But if you use her off the gate, can she finish the same way? And it sounds like we'll be behind the leader. For mine, if I was going out and doing those pre-race interviews like I used to do, I feel like we might be behind the leader, but she could lead and win, couldn't she?
She definitely could. I think the only times where we've used her at the start and she hasn't finished off is when she's fired up and over raced, and she hasn't done that for a long time. A couple of those occasions weren't due to running the gate. It was she actually, kicked the wheels of the sulky and over raced, and then she's looked very ordinary or disappointing in a few of those runs, or a couple of those runs when that had happened. So I'm not concerned about running the gate and having her still finish off. It's just a matter of the mid-race pressure. And, obviously Major Delight would look to be the first challenger there. And I don't think she actually runs her best races when she's in front.
No.
I think her best races are when she's drawn outside. I've actually driven her in a trial recently this time around, and she doesn't actually race that well in front. So it's I think having a horse like her sit outside you that can really carve out a really strong sectionals from start to finish is probably a tougher assignment than actually sitting on it and try to outsprint it.
It's all about your guns. To see if she runs the gate and she over races, that's where Greg's his strength. We've done some push-up challenges.
Well, I mean, we've seen time and again though she can, and it's great insight to think, was hitting the wheel, and that might explain the over racing previously. And I just keep going back to the Robin Dundee run, gents, where, back in the field, a little bit awkward position, Greg, but, she'd been flying going into that, and you found your way through, and she exploded up the straight. And then she was obviously, things didn't go right the week after.
Yeah, exactly. It's such a shame that Queen Elizabeth up there, because struck a bit of trouble at a very vital stage. And the way
Coach had the lot on, by the way, but just be careful, Greg, because Coach had the lot on.
No. I'd made my money the week prior, so it was all good,
okay.
Jace.
All right, okay.
Yeah, I'm tipping she wasn't. I'm not saying she would have won if she hadn't happened, but she would have gone very close to it, in my opinion, the way she was travelling that night. So, it was sort of pretty unfortunate that it happened in a race like that.
And just a very quick one. I'll let Codes get into the major subject because there's been big news over the last 7 days, obviously, in harness racing in Victoria. But I'm certainly not going to divulge the nature of the conversation. Up in New South Wales at one point. When I say conversation, I mean heated debate. Basically, having a conversation with Greg is a heated debate most time between
right.
me and I. But it seems
Especially
like
in the early hours of the morning.
it's been. I'm normally in bed by then. It seems like you're very much enjoying. I mean, everyone says training trotters, square gators is a bigger challenge and more rewarding. And Lara J Farmers had an incredible record with square gator. Do you personally have you found it more more rewarding, and B, how quickly picking up all these things? It's sort of talked about as a mythical thing, how you shoe them, getting the balance right and everything. But you seem to be on the ball pretty quickly, and it seems like you love getting the trotters. Is it slightly more rewarding when those trotters go as well as they possibly can?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's funny because historically they've always been I suppose, classed as second-class citizens in this part of the world behind the paces, and they've changed so much. Especially over the last decade, and most stables have at least one trotter in their stable now. And obviously they're growing all the time. So we've really enjoyed it. Obviously, we've been pretty fortunate to have a horse like Harry come into the stable, but we've had quite a bit of success with others, as you say, and I think we're kind of lucky in a way. I think our facility here, our track, really suits the trotting gait. Obviously, well documented that we have some very undulating property and a big long hill, straight track and things like that. And I think it's actually very good building the trotting gait, probably more so than the pacing gait. And I think that's probably ultimately the secret as to why we're having so much success. With the majority of the trotters that come here, we don't jump them all out the ground, of course, but yeah, our strike rate's pretty good with the ones that come here. So yeah, we do enjoy them.
So, Greg, we'll switch course as suggested by Jason, and we'll just talk about some of the news that we've seen out of Victoria in the past 7 days. And I'm not going to delve into. I was originally going to potentially run through a bit of a timeline on everything that's occurred in the last week, but it's extensive, and we may indeed actually let you go before we do that, Greg, because it will take some time. But ultimately, there was a meeting, a HRAC meeting, Harness Racing Advisory Council meeting, which HRV invited industry stakeholders into. The industry stakeholders have sat in that meeting. They've found out some of the information there that they say they previously didn't know. They've taken that public with a media release, which basically suggested that they don't have the confidence currently in that current HRV board and senior management due to some financial losses. And which have been forecast for this financial year. We've since seen HRV come out in some interviews with the chairman and CEO appearing on radio stations, and we've seen some media drop today too. So some Q&As on the trots.com.au, and also I noticed one on Trot Guide, which you wouldn't have had a chance to read yet because they've literally dropped as we were starting this
He's
recording.
not watching us. He's not reading.
But so Greg, are you across it? And what's your sort of reaction, I guess, to this? Because clearly none of this is good news for the game, the position, and the dirty laundry. I don't think any of it is great for the game going forward. How is it from a participant's point of view, who's so invested in the game?
Yeah, look, it's obviously very, very concerning. The future of the sport and the position that we're in at the moment. But a lot of it's not exactly new news. It's this hasn't happened overnight. Like the sport's sort of been in a precarious situation for quite a long time now. But I think probably the worst thing. There's been a lot of talking, obviously, around the track. People that probably have a little bit of misinformation and, the Chinese whisper effect, scaremonger tactics, I suppose, in a way from some circles, can create a bit of fear among the industry, and that hasn't been helpful. On on the flip side, there's probably hasn't been enough information put out there to the participants, for quite some time now as to the actual situation of where we're at. There's probably misrepresentation of the facts along many issues along the way have sort of got to this stage. And a lot of things are coming out now that people probably should have already been aware of many years ago, and it mightn't have come as such a big shock, but doesn't matter which way you look at it and who you want to point the fingers at and blame. The sport isn't in a great situation right now. Things need to change for the better. I don't know if that's going to happen in the short term. I think there's going to be a bit more pain yet for the game before we can even consider heading back on a positive path.
Just quickly, I don't know how long you invested in it, but I reckon there was a time when you got involved with the VTDA, just briefly. It's a difficult situation, isn't it? Because I think what you've already mentioned, knowing this is not unexpected. Maybe a few elements are unexpected because you don't know the exact details. But I think one issue that I have with it, and I'm not airing my dirty laundry, but basically, if there was a dissemination of information across a period of time to let people know, I think it would be a lot easier. I think part of the reason that this has exploded the way it has is a feeling that people have been kept in the dark for a long period of time. And then all of a sudden, they've told you, you've come in, they've told you, okay, we found a couple of tumours. There's a couple of tumours, but you're fine. And then you come in and say, I'll tell you what, a couple of them are inoperable. And then they say, yes, but I reckon with radiation and chemo, we can sort this situation out to a certain degree. But all people hear is the inoperable side. And that's, I think, where it's broken down. A lack of communication over a long period of time. And then an enormous amount of information all at once. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. That's pretty much what's happened now. And probably one of the biggest issues that's just come out just in the last sort of week or so is the land around Melton. That's been such a massive issue, and a lot of people have been speaking over many years now as to what's going to happen with this land, and that's going to be our saviour, and whether a training centre is going to be built on it, and so many different options available. And then you find out now it was as long ago as I think 2019 when the legislation was changed, and we basically haven't got rights to that money, to the sale from that money of what it's worth, and no one knew that, and they're all just sort of thought this has happened overnight, and whereas it happened 3 or 4 years ago or something. So just little stuff like that would have been handy for the broader public to know.
Did you even know? You're on the pulse, Greg. Did you even know?
I knew a little while ago, but I'm talking maybe 6 to 12 months ago at the most.
Yeah. And I think what we've seen from the chairman and CEO this week, certainly, and it's reiterated again tonight as I have a quick squiz at the Q&A that's come out tonight on the Trot Guide, they've made the point that after that change in 2019, the HRV board's been negotiating with government and trying to get an exemption for that land. And unfortunately, the exemption, as Jason takes his headphones off, the exemption hasn't been forthcoming, Greg. So it sounds like they've had a crack, but ultimately the government's said, no, you're not getting an exemption. But one of the positives, I suppose, if you can find a positive to come out of it, is that HRV, from all reports this week, and this was some breaking news, I thought, they now don't carry any debt. And if that debt was costing the industry $2 million a year, I think that's some good news. Obviously, the other side of that will be what we can get now going forward with that land still in place. Is there any sort of entitlements we've got as an industry and any sort of claim we've got where that money can come back? But the debt clearing, I think, is an important part, not carrying that debt every year.
100%. We're obviously no chance of going forward if we were sort of still getting further and further behind with the interest on the debt. So at least that's something. From my understanding, the information I've had is, that what we have got, the money that has been, that debt that has been cleared, it doesn't equate to what that land's actually worth. So we sort of haven't got value for money at this point in time. So, yeah, that in lies the biggest hurdle from what I can see. But even we have to be look beyond that. If even if that wasn't the case, and we did get all the money from the sale of that, well, we can't continue on as an industry the way we're going, because we're only going to continue to lose. And once that money, it was a massive sum of money that got lobbed into the system right now, it's only going to last so long, and then we'd be back in this situation down the track. So things have to change anyway, and whether that's a reduction of clubs or races or however it's going to work. Either way, we have to find a way that we're not hemorrhaging money year after year.
Well, Gregory, as you mentioned, I go to bed at 11, but 11:30 the latest. But if we were having this chat privately in the early hours of the morning, tell me, it's probably not worth, even though I would like to touch on it later, it's not worth going backwards. We have to go forwards. But what needs to be done? Give us 1, 2, 3, and don't look up in the sky like you have to think about these things. Well, you're a man that's got a lot of ideas. I have, Cody has. You would have thought about this a hell of a lot, even though you don't need to. But it is your industry, and you need it to be healthy so that your situation can be healthy and your profession can be healthy. Give us at least 1, maybe 2 or 3 things that you would. I'll give you one to kick you off that I've mentioned plenty of times. A couple of things. 1, I did speak to the administration at the time, maybe 18 months ago, and they've now probably conceded the fact that there should have been bigger cuts at the time, because I felt like if you made bigger cuts, you've got some money to work with to try and build promotion. But I'm also a fan of the inner and outer circle. I think lowering the lowest base stake to like $3,000. Now, no one's declared this, but if you do, that's ridiculous. Whereas I am a big believer in, if you have a bunch of $1,500 races, but you can't be in them, Jess can't be in them, Andy Gath can't be in them, Emma Stewart can't be in them. They are for hobbyists and I guess amateurs in the sport. And I've almost done the maths myself. I reckon they can make at least as much money and have way more excitement if that was the case, and then you save a bunch of money on the back end. So there you go. I've got the ball rolling. Give us 1, 2 or 3 things that maybe Greg Sugars would implement if he was Chief Executive Officer of Harness Racing Victoria.
Well, firstly, I'm the wrong person to ask, because, as I told you before, I don't know form. I'm not a form analyst. That's your expertise. I'm just a driver. So yeah, I'm the wrong person to ask, because I'm not I'm not a CEO material. But it's quite obvious that as an industry, we need to find a way to not lose so much money on every race meeting that gets run across the country. Every day of the week. So how we do that is, I don't know. I don't think anyone knows.
Hang on a second. I'm pulling the bullshit up right here. This is not what this podcast is about. You haven't watched it. Tell us the truth. Where do we move this around? I mean, you've already spoken. It might have been a faux pas. Reduction of clubs. I agree with that. Number 1.
But that's been referenced in the conversation this week. They've made the point, CEO and chairman, that we've met 28 clubs in Victoria. That's an extensive amount of clubs for the 440 race meetings.
We have more clubs than any other state, and there's more tracks. So I think you have to look into how much what it costs to run some of these clubs, like what it costs over the course of a year to maintain them, to run races there and all that sort of thing, and what they bring back into the industry. There's no doubt we've seen in recent times with the changing of the calendar and having certain clubs now racing on particular days, that it's been proven over time now that certain clubs have a higher turnover on certain days, and certain clubs obviously have higher turnover than other tracks. So therefore, we need to stop racing at the tracks that don't produce good turnover. We need to stop racing on the days or the time that aren't proactive and produce a decent amount of turnover, because basically that's what we survive on. There's no point, running races at bad times, running races that don't attract the most punting dollar. But yeah, again, that's probably a massive one. It's going to be hard for a lot of people to swallow, but I think certainly, yeah, half the tracks need to be closed.
All right, I'm going to throw a few at you. I've already mentioned one of them. Maybe two different circuits, one more for professionals and one not so. You can't compete. And when you look at the races that are going around right now, I'm talking about maybe 4 or 5 meetings a week that you're paying $1,500, and people think that's ridiculous. But if they can actually win, I mean, the people in the industry, those people who are hanging in by the hair of their chinny chin. One thing that really angers them is they go to the races and they can't win. If you can, I'm talking about a birdship style meeting, but it happens all the time. Number one, is that.
Can I just say, Jay Bond, before Greg touches on that, though, remember we were talking about tiered prize money back in the day, and I remember having some conversations then with some participants who, who were struggling to get a winner at the time. There was one in particular, I won't name names, but they were saying to me, I won't race for that amount. I'm not going to race for $4,000 or whatever it was. I'll race for $8,000. And I said, yeah, but what if you can't win the $8,000 race, right? But you can win the $4,000. Wouldn't you actually get better returns off the $4,000? And they were adamant that they didn't see it that way. And I believe what you're saying, Jason, but my point is, how do you convince a lot of those people who are simply saying that is wrong, we cannot race for that amount? And I think that's part of the issue, isn't it? If you cannot bring people along on a journey with you, it's very hard to exact big change.
Will you tell me, Greg, and I'm not being dismissive. Everyone knows how much I love the people in the industry, but sometimes I think you've got to do things, and then maybe they realise it's okay.
Yeah, a lot of that sounds good in theory, and a lot of what you said, I don't necessarily disagree with. But as Cody's just pointed out, it's pretty hard for the if you talk to the majority of people out there, the little trainers, they won't swallow that, they won't cop that, and it's they're already complain now. There's a lot of complaints that with our tiered prize money structure as it is at the moment, that your lesser class of horse, doesn't matter who trains them, actually races for less prize money than your higher rated horses, and that's already an issue. So then to say that you're gonna only have all these races for a lot less money, that it's only going to be for hobby trainers, I don't know how you get the industry to swallow that. But on the other side of the coin, if you're talking about not professional people that are actually relying on making a wage or an income off the sport, and they are strictly hobbyists, well then it's like any other hobby you have. If your hobby's golf or fishing or whatever, like you go into that, it's going to cost you money. You don't go into it to try and make money. If you go, your hobby's playing golf every Sunday afternoon, you're not earning money that what they're getting on the PGA tour. So it's what are you in the sport for? Are you in the sport to be a business, to be successful and earn money, or is it just for the love of it that you're happy to go around and like you say, Jay Bond, win a race no matter what it's worth? Like, where do you sit in the industry? That's the hard thing. But the hobbyists, they make up the majority of our industry too, the small time. So we can't afford to alienate these people and have them leave our sport, because if they do, then we don't have a sport as professionals either. So it's a very, very tough balancing act, and I don't know how you get that balance right.
I don't want to alienate them. My old man used to get money playing golf on a Sunday, playing skins and having maybe 8 beers on the court. He's hit a two iron off the tee. Very strong man. So I'm talking. I sort of did the sums in my head. And if you are winning, if you're one of those hobbyists and you have to compete against Greg Sugars, Emma Stewart, Andy Gath, just yada yada, maybe in 6 months you win one race and you run 2 placings. But in this circuit, you win 6 or 7 races. You will actually fiscally end up with more money as well. And I reckon, and you get to go to the track and hang out with people and not go to the track. I can't imagine driving to the track thinking, I've got a horse in the float and there's no possible way it can win. But if they're going there thinking, I'll tell you what, I reckon win, and the social aspect of it as well. Another quick one. We've got very limited broadcast promotional options these days. Trot's Vision is half on its knees, I think. Do we, like the thoroughbreds have done, make Melton, Flemington the be all and end all, and sort of put everything into that? Because you've obviously looked at a couple of the figures with the turnover of the tracks, and we know that Melton makes more than anywhere else. So do you invest heavily in, say, once upon a time, when I got into the sport, the regional tracks, some of the racing was nearly as good as it was at Melton on a Friday or Saturday night. But now, Greg, is there any merit in prioritising that meeting and saying we're going to try and make most of our money from the week or for the week out of that one big meeting on Saturday night?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, there's no doubt. Obviously, yeah, Melton holds more money. Any meeting run there will hold more money than anyone else. So, yeah, certainly we have to sort of make the most and showcase that. There's no doubt about that.
I'd want to point out something that I found interesting in a lot of the commentary this week, Jay Bon and Greg, and it's the CEO pointing out that in amongst my pages of notes here, the CEO pointed out that our prize money to revenue ratio in Victoria is 66%, which is the highest of the 3 codes currently in Victoria. Now, living beyond our means, I think, as an industry at the moment, I think that's clear. That's why the cuts have been made. We've seen cuts being announced through HRV. We're seeing, unfortunately, cuts already to prize money, and it sounds like, it's obvious there are more cuts to prize money on the horizon. One point that does keep coming up from the CEO, Jace, which I find interesting, and the chair, they do keep mentioning the cost of running racing, and I get this, the cost of running racing in Victoria under the Racing Act, because it's interesting that whilst we have that prize money to revenue ratio at 66%, highest of the 3 codes, welfare and integrity make up 25% of our cost base. And of the significant money that's been invested by government in the last few years, and there's been some big figures thrown around about what's been put in, $64 million from 29 to 2023 through various grants, etc. A lot of that money has been put into HRV Hero and also integrity issues, so welfare and integrity. It seems to me that the price of racing and running racing in Victoria is higher than the price of running racing in New South Wales and Queensland, given that point keeps being brought up over and over again. Is that a fair point, Jace?
Well, don't you reckon? I want to ask Greg. I don't know how much he hangs out with those in the periphery anymore. The common man, the pub. Maybe he went to the box the other day for the Collingwood game. I don't know. Glenn Douglas has one. Basically, it's great having 25% of the money in integrity, but everywhere I go, Greg, the opinion on harness racing is the same as it was 20 years ago. I'm not going to say those terrible sayings, am I?
No, I wouldn't. If I was you.
Pleats on chairs and
none of that nonsense.
No, but honestly,
that's not for us.
No, I get into I don't.
I hear you.
I'm a lover, not a fighter, Greg. But I get into arguments because it's not true. It's great to have the integrity there, but I feel like some of that money should be in promoting the fact that, that the sport is cleaner than it's ever been, and certainly a completely different sport than it was 20, 25 years ago.
Yeah, no, I don't know. That's just something we've always dealt with as an industry. Probably, before I was involved, and right throughout my career, you get that all the time. That everyone knows those sayings, and the general public.
It pisses you off because it's not the same anymore.
Exactly, I know that, but I don't know how we change it. You can't change that mentality of the general public or the uneducated to actually what's going on. It's very, very hard, and but the world's changing completely. With when you talk of the welfare issues and that sort of thing, it's I think all 3 codes of racing are a dying sport at some stage. It's just how quickly they die out. Unfortunately, it's a very sad reality, but I think that's where we're headed. There's a massive push for whip-free racing and things like that. There was quite a few years ago. There's always going to be that push from certain sectors of the community, and the thing about that is most of the, I'll say, fan mail I get, the critical fan mail that you get from time to time, is the exact opposite, that you're not hitting them hard enough, or you're not trying hard enough. So, these people that are actually, even though, I don't agree with what they're saying on many of those occasions, but at least they're actually watching, and they're obviously invested in the sport in some way. And we don't want to deter them, like the fact that that we use whips, and a lot of people don't like that. If you take them away, that's not going to get people that aren't interested in racing to start being interested and think this is wonderful. It's just not going to happen. It's just potentially going to alienate the people that are already sort of there at the moment. So that
Greg,
sort of thing is very tough.
And I'll say too, I don't think that we as an industry have prosecuted our argument enough about just how well so many of the horses are treated. The overwhelming majority of horses are fed before their trainers, their owners, their whatever. The industry feeds the horses before they feed themselves. They look after the horses. Yep. They're beautiful animals. They're turned out to the races in pristine order, right? And I've had these discussions over the years. I've fallen into the trap in my younger days of trying to argue with the different coalition for protection of racehorses and all this sort of nonsense. They don't want a bar of reality because it goes completely against what they stand for in their ideal world. Okay, so they're not willing to listen. So I agree with you 100%. You don't waste your time trying to win those people over. That said, I do agree with you, Greg. I think broader societal values are changing, and I think it's essential that racing's on the front foot with that. And that's where, back to my original point, constantly telling the story of reality and actually trying to get some cut through is important.
But that's what I mean. The 25% spin on integrity, it's okay, make it 15, and then 10% of that money is telling the story of how well things are going.
J-Bon, it's only okay to make it 15 if the government, of which you are, allows you to make it 15.
Am I government?
No, but Harness Racing Victoria is a government authority. That makes things. My point was that makes things very, very tricky. A lot of people could say, yes, spend less here, spend less there. My point was, when you're getting money from the government, which has to be spent on a certain thing, you cannot tell government, well, we're actually going to spend it on something different.
No, I always say my mates that I grew up with wouldn't, whips, they couldn't care. They're not getting involved in racing. They're not having a bet. Greg, should the states support each other a little bit better? That's one thing I've always had a bugbear about, that when it comes to promotion, all of the various states look after one another. And right now, Victoria's under the pump. Basically, we've been leading the way for years and years and years, for decades probably, and now we're under the pump. But I've always felt like when there's a Queensland Carnival on, or a Miracle Mile, or a WA Pacing Cup, that everyone puts the money in. And because I tell you what, if you're not, it's like footy. If you're not following what's going on up there, why are you following what's going on down here? So if they're not following Just Believe when it goes overseas, all the big races in Queensland, or the Miracle Mile, then they're not connected to the sport. It's one thing. I think we should all look after each other a little bit more, because I tell you what, Victoria could bounce back from this. And if everyone else goes down,
exactly,
I don't think it's going to make much difference.
Yeah, no, I agree. Even something as simple as the racing calendar throughout Australia, it's been that hickledy over, so many years now that everyone.
I love that saying.
It's all over the shop. The racing dates are changing all the time, and you're clashing with states for states. But 100%, like, we should all be working together. We're one industry, and we need to sort of all band together and do the best for the whole sport across the nation.
And what about another one of my avant-garde ideas? We know that the Sky situation, the TAB situation, who knows where that's going to end up? Most of the people who work at HRV now, previously from TAB, but at some stage, I felt we should have cut the cord at some stage earlier and maybe partnered with a different wagering service provider, but only one. But that's another story. I'm looking at the situation, and always have, that you've got the thoroughbreds over here. Wouldn't it be great to partner with the greyhounds? Like, wouldn't it be great if there was a trots dog division? Because then you've got more money and more ability. We can then educate the greyhound punters about harness racing. Well, I'm sure there is a mutually beneficial relationship there, don't you reckon? I know you've called the end of all codes at some point, Armageddon, Doomsday, but wouldn't it be great if we actually partnered with them? Because you just think they're the two smaller codes. Why can't we get together and organise a deal? It might not be that easy, but I reckon it's a great idea.
Yeah, it sounds like a great idea. And exactly, I don't know how that works, how you get that off the ground, but
Jamie Ennis does it.
Why can't it work? See, I know there's the different government structures, if that's the right terminology, but different structures in different states that all sort of feed off each other. Like, the total revenue of the turnover from all three codes that gets split up between all the codes, and that's how WA is set up with RAWA, and that sort of all the money from all the codes goes in, and that's why sort of Perth racing is going so good. It's not necessarily that the harness racing side of things is going so good, but they all sort of work together in a way to make it work. Queensland, I think the same, and I'm not sure exactly how New South
Tasmania
Wales
are the
works,
same,
but it might be. But that's sort of what we need here, that all three codes can sort of work together. But yeah, from a media side of things, as well as a prize money side of things.
Greg, we've heard Shane Glowry on SEN Track this week talking with Gareth Hall, the treasurer of the VHRC. He's been the spokesperson for the industry groups this week. He's made the point that on Sunday there's a rally happening at the Bendigo Harness Racing Club. He's rallying, and all the kindred bodies are rallying the industry to turn out in droves and to come together for the sake of the sport's future. Now, I think, as we know with rallies, they can go one of two ways. They can either be an outpouring of anger and all sorts of vitriol, et cetera, or they can be a festival of ideas and coming up with constructive ideas for the future and the way forward. What's your take on the rally on Sunday, and what do you hope that it achieves?
Oh, I hope that it gets people together in the right direction, and you get the right information out there, and people get educated to the actual situation that we're in, and they don't get sort of overwhelmed by the emotional side of things and head off in a tangent and just rant and rave and obviously talk amongst themselves, but don't actually get anywhere. We sort of need to get the right people with the right knowledge leading the way, and hopefully the industry can actually get the right information out there, band together, and then hopefully look at a way of making sense of what's happening, and we can work on making the right decisions to move forward. There's no point just everyone getting there and having their own opinion and off facts that aren't actual facts.
That's $1.03, by the way. I think Greg pretty much
fair chance.
We'll let you go in a moment. Greg, one thing I've always had a problem with is self-interest dominating the sport and insularity. But be honest, looking at your situation now, you're hearing shit from the rally section that you're probably not the kindred bodies and the way they've gone about it, and you're probably not wrapped with that, and you're not wrapped with the situation here. For somebody in the position you and Jess are, does it actually just make you more insular and just think, I'll tell you what, I mean, we're getting you to discuss it, but basically just leave me out of it, and I'm just going to look after my own house, and hopefully this story has a happy ending.
Oh, well, yeah, we definitely hope there's a happy ending, of course. Anyone.
But does it just make you think about I've got to look after my owners, my horses? I can't be worrying about this shit because I
very much so. Like, yeah, our situation here, we're so busy and got so much going on that we don't really have any free time to do anything outside of what we do here. So, look, someone obviously needs to, people in the industry need to sort of stand up and be counted and sort of take stock for our future. And we certainly want to be a part of that in some way, shape or form. But it's very hard to find the time to do so, in our situation. So it's, it's not easy, but also if no one does it, we're certainly not going to be better off in the future.
Because you'd be one of the best people, but you don't. It's just too hard, isn't it?
It is very difficult.
Pretty hard, isn't it? Yeah, exactly. Finding the time. There's a lot of outgoing costs and expenses, as we know, and that's one thing I think we're all in vehement agreement on. There's not enough money at the moment in my opinion, to go around, and that's with the situation now, and that's living beyond our means. So there are some really tough times ahead, and I think the only way forward, and we'll discuss more, Greg, as we let you go, but I think the only way forward is for people to come together one way or another and find a way forward.
Hang on just quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Illawong Larrajay, he's not going to stay for the form, so Illawong Larrajay, any hope?
Yeah, definitely a hope. It should be improved on its run the other day, and she does a little bit of lack of gate speed, only it sort of holds her own okay. So where she lands, I'll let you decide. But yeah,
play well back and then have to come with one runner is what I've got.
And I think Exalted's flying, Greg, but Dichotomy's in the race too and also flying. Quick lead on those two up against the champion mares resuming.
Yeah, obviously both up in grade, taking on a horse like Queen Elida, and a couple other handy ones in there as well. But yeah, Exalted's sort of heading in the right direction. She looks the leader, obviously. Her record over the 2200, like she hasn't had many starts in recent times over the slightly longer trip. So whether that sees her out or not just depends on how keen she gets in the run as to how well she runs that trip out. But very impressed with what Dichotomy's been able to do the last couple of starts over that trip. So she's going to get a good run in transit. So they're both definitely chances of being in the money, but don't know if they can win.
I got screwed in the game plan. 850 it was early. Dichotomy.
What was?
Dichotomy opened 850 with a certain provider.
Right.
How much is there between them and ability?
I think last week you mean, Jace. Yep.
Yeah.
They're two very different horses, so it's pretty hard to say. She's all speed, exalted, whereas Dichotomy is a bit more dour. So probably not a lot between them overall, but two very different horses.
And before we say sayonara, give us one that we don't know much about that you've got a nice opinion of.
Geez, I don't know if there is one at the moment that you don't know much about.
I don't know much about a lot, so
most of our
we didn't know much about He's from Heaven not too long ago, mate. So
don't know if I can pinpoint one at the moment. No, there's basically everything we've got here at the moment that's any good is racing at the moment. So we've got to find some new ones before we wear these lot out.
Fantastic.
I'll tell you what, if there's one that jumps out of the ground in the next 3 weeks, we'll be bringing this cat back on and having a chat and saying, mate, I forgot about that when it was late.
Well, there's enough of the proven ones going well enough at the moment, Greg, so you're pretty well protected by that. Mate, thanks so much for coming on the Tongue Tie Off podcast on Pace Setters. We've loved having a yak with you, mate.
No worries at all. It's been good. I'll try to tune into future episodes.
Please do.
Do your best, mate. I know it's hard, but do your best. God bless you.
Cheers, guys.
All right. Cheers, Greg. Greg Sugars there joining us for the podcast. As the birthday for some reason, the birthday balloons have just randomly appeared on my screen for all you folks just on the audio version of the pod. But
Greg's 40th, whenever it is.
Greg's 40th, exactly. Terrific chat with Greg Sugars Jason, covering plenty of territory.
Yeah, I very much enjoyed it. Probably took winding and wielding turns that we weren't expecting. But look, Greg is I think everybody knows, Greg is an incredibly intelligent person. I think he was recusing himself a couple of times. I'm a driver, I'm a trainer, with Jess, obviously, at Lara J Farm. But the truth is, I've had those discussions or similar discussions with him a million times. And when I say discussions, almost certainly heated debates. But he's got some extraordinary ideas on where we should go. The thing is, as he mentioned, he's an incredibly busy man doing what he's doing.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to change the game. All you can do is contribute your voice. And Greg has done that over the years. Andy's done that. Like all of the, I think there's, virtually everybody has tried to contribute a voice, but it's about it getting heard. And it's also about hybridizing everyone's ideas. What I've always done is listen to everybody and then go, okay, I really like that. Don't like that much. I love that. And that's how I think you come up with the best ideas.
I think they're accusing himself. This might be controversial, but I think you can't blame harness racing participants for doing that, Jace, just like you might not be able to blame harness racing commentators for doing it occasionally, because I think historically there are corners of the industry that can be a little unkind when people do have an opinion they don't agree with. And I think that too often in our game over the years, that's been seen. And I think quite often with a lot of topics, you do have an overwhelming silent majority who stays off things like Facebook and Twitter, and they don't necessarily let their views come out. And I think that's to the detriment of what you just said, and that is sharing ideas and ways forward, because a lot of these people have got, real harness racing brains.
Well, one question that I didn't get to ask him, Greg, I was about to, but then sort of backed away, is what are the conversations like right now for him? Because he's got a balanced view.
Yep.
But the stalls are like high school.
Yep. You've got a real mix, don't you? Balance of views. You've got the real angry people, which you can understand anger when your industry you love's not going as you want it to. And it goes both ways too on, participants not expressing opinions because they might get jumped down by certain parts of the industry, but equally they might get slapped down with a fine by HRB, obviously, as well. So it goes both ways, doesn't it, Jace?
One of the best podcasts would be the conversations in the stalls, though.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they'd be real and raw. I mean, not we don't get that.
Well, breaking
Well-
news, we've set up some microphones in the stalls.
Well,
Joking.
Blake
For the record.
Blake Redden
Yep.
once said, and I agree with him, that the best sports documentary ever would be on harness racing.
Of course it would.
I mean,
Of course it would.
for several reasons, scandals,
Or the scandals, mate. Well, you know, the scandals.
boys and girls.
Look, let's just call it as no. Let's be honest. Everyone will acknowledge. Hey, you know what? You spend a lot of time with these people every day. That's your industry. They're the circles you're moving.
Because you go meet them, yeah.
Yeah, so you are going to get, you have your soap opera home and away type stuff that's happening all the time.
Never
But
watched an episode of that, so I don't know.
You'd also have your
Neighbours.
Drive to Survive stuff with your rivalries. Remember some of them. I don't know if it happens as much these days. Maybe it's just I haven't been out there. But when a couple of drivers come back and the trainers are ropeable that one driver's done something,
Of course, it still happens.
there's still a bit of biffo in the stall. Well, I haven't heard of much biffo for a while, Jace.
There'd also be a little bit still of a driver going in, maybe saying something about another driver. And say, I'll drive it better.
That's why if you had driver managers like jockey managers, that would be going on all the time.
Yes.
What did you make of the interview with Greg on the Victorian stuff then, Jace? We've talked about, his what he's put out there. It's obviously, what about your views too? It's been a big week. It is very complex because there's a lot to unpick and it's all being unpicked really quickly, isn't it?
Well, I think Gregory speaks for himself. He's an incredibly articulate, eloquent gentleman. But a couple of probably the subjects we didn't get to. I just want to see the way forward. I don't. I think we discussed the situation the way it is right now, but the way forward, and I'm more than happy right here and right now. Well, a couple of things.
Yep.
We would both be in furious concurrence agreement, would we not? That the current administration, I mean, you talk about a poison chalice. This thing has got the wood shavings of arsenic. It's got cyanide. It's got everything. I do not specifically, I want it known, blame the current administration because we would both agree that this has been an endemic issue, systemic issue over a long, long period of time. And really, you could look at timelines and almost put little markers on them where certain things could have been done differently. Nobody knew about the government situation. You know a lot more about it than other people because you're a political activist. But no one knew that we were going to be in this situation. But you look at it and go, if we'd done things differently here, and here. And I think the hard thing for somebody like me and probably you as well is that I'm not looking back in hindsight as 2020 as though, it all seems clear now. I had a very strong opinion all the way through the time that I was at Harness Racing Victoria about what could have been done. So this isn't about the current administration. The only thing I believe the current administration have done wrong is not communicate well enough over a period of time and then probably inundate the industry with incredibly dire information. And as Greg said, it's not unexpected, but when you hear that information, it's almost like you can't hear anything else, the reasons why, how we might go forward. That would be my only criticism. I think this is something that's been going on for a long, long time.
Yeah, I think so. But I think too the sudden withdrawal of government funding, that's just so crucial and critical, and it's such a chief aspect, and it doesn't matter who's.
Well,
it doesn't matter who's in charge. Exactly, it doesn't matter who's running the show. The government's not going to necessarily listen to one person more than another. It is what it is. I mean, to the point that Adam Kilgore, the chairman, made on the radio regarding the Bendigo Hospital or the Bendigo Harness Racing Club. I mean, it doesn't come down to that specifically, just for the record, but that is what politicians will be thinking. And as much as we're all invested in this racing game and this harness racing game that we love, when the Treasury's looking at it, saying, okay, we could either we've run out of money, we can either keep funding this or we can keep funding that. What decisions are you going to make? And look, has harness racing relied too heavily on government funding for too long? Clearly, in hindsight, yes, it has. But you don't know when that's going to stop or if it's going to stop. And if that's become the norm and the government has allowed that to be the norm, then I guess that puts the administrators in a pretty tricky position, I would have thought, Jace.
I mean, I'm delving into territory that you would know a lot more about again than I would.
Not
but
necessarily. I mean, I've listened to a lot of information this week. That's all.
But the other issue is that quite often over the last 10 years, the racing minister has been one of the heaviest hitters in the Victorian government.
Correct.
Dennis Napthine,
Yep.
Martin Pakula,
Yep.
these people where power is real. I mean, I hate it. I hate the fact that I'm not a person who seeks power or has much respect for it. I think you can find your power different ways. But in the realities of life, and this isn't a go at the current racing minister, because I had a couple of chats with him going back a year or 18 months ago, and he's a very smart, intelligent guy.
Absolutely.
Journalist like yourself.
Yep.
But it's very difficult to be able to apply your case, particularly now. We don't know. We don't know the absolute ins and outs and intricacies of the budget. What we do know is there's not enough money to go around, and that harness racing has taken a hit. Is it a short-sighted thing for the government? I think it is, because, I mean, you go back to the pandemic alone, and racing was able. Does racing deserve a reward? The 3 codes for what they did during the pandemic, probably. But the number of people that are employed, the number of people that, you'd love to think that there was more care taken with it. But having said that, I also agree that over the last 10 or 12 years, that harness racing could never stand on its own 2 feet. But I feel like more should have been done to get closer to the mark rather than suckling on the teat as much as they have.
Well, I guess going forward, it has to stand on its own 2 feet, though, doesn't it? And when you say that it couldn't stand on its own 2 feet,
we agree that it can't.
Yeah, you mean that it couldn't stand on its own 2 feet in the current makeup of the Victorian harness racing industry. Of course, there might be a model where it can stand on its own 2 feet, relying heavily on revenue, but that would be a much smaller industry than what we're dealing with now.
But
now, I just want to finish this point that I made earlier with Greg on Jason. It is this. It's an interesting point that I keep coming back to about making sure that Victoria is running racing as required under the Act. Okay, and this is where the welfare and integrity side of it comes into it. Both very important areas. We know that. Everyone knows that's a very important area. But what is it about the other states, right, and the costs that they're outlaying on running the sport that Victoria is missing? When you look at Victoria's announced a lot of job cuts and redundancies have been paid and people have been moved on. How much leaner can HRV get, right? And if so, my question would be, where would those job cuts be coming from? There's no marketing team in there at HRV anymore. That's gone. The media team's changed pretty significantly. There's the whole executive's been reduced, I think, from 7 to 4. How much leaner can you get? And what are we doing differently in Victoria than New South Wales, Jason, and Queensland?
All right. So we discussed this between ourselves earlier. I never would have thought this would be the case. But Greg touched on it. RAWA, the Queensland system. I always thought that the tri-code system in governance would have led to harness racing being further marginalised. But the current evidence is that it's actually working better because, I mean, David Brick's a great operator over in Queensland.
He is.
But I think there's an understanding that if you're looking after all 3 codes, then you can't let one of them go by the wayside. Now, market forces, if you let them just take over and everyone's for themselves, then harness racing will get left by the wayside. So there's that. So you take in, there's Tasmania is in a weird situation, but they're also a tri-code situation. Queensland seems to be going quite well. Tri-code, WA, South Australia, hate to say it, cooked, fork in it. New South Wales, I'm told great things about the CEO that's running New South Wales right now, but they are still.
I think South Australia's on the way back, Jace. I think they've made some ground. They were coming from a low base, but I think they're doing okay.
In a very, 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 very difficult situation. They need help, right?
Sure.
New South Wales, if we're being totally honest, and I'm sure you'd agree with me, being authentic, that there was a sale of Harold Park going back some years ago, and this is what Greg was talking about. It's okay to give a bunch of money now, but if there's system's the same. It's going to
Yeah.
dissipate. They would have had so much money. I'm not having a go at New South Wales, but if you actually looked into their situation the way that Victoria's situation is being looked into, I think you would find that a lot of that cash has been mismanaged as well. That's the last chance. I never wanted another job in any harness racing body, but I'm really cooking myself here. But they're the facts of the matter. I mean, I don't know exactly what Harold Park was sold for, but it was an amazing amount of money, and I don't know that it will also run out at some point.
Well, the discussion around a national approach you mentioned earlier on the show, Jace, of having states working together better. We've always agreed that should happen, but of course you are dealing with multiple different jurisdictions that these principal racing bodies have to work under, and that makes it very hard.
It's a good, in my opinion, it's always been a good faith situation. Victoria, for years and years and years, were the strongest. And if Victoria had shown support to the other states, I think that would have been reciprocated in kind. And even now, I think it still can be. As I say, David Brick's up there, and he's the head of the harness racing department, I believe, still up in Queensland. And if you have those conversations and you create reciprocal arrangements, it's such a unique situation, isn't it? Where I use footy as an example, but basically, if you just ignored Sydney or GWS or Fremantle, you just pretended you didn't even bother about televising the games. Yeah. Like, you can't do it, because if you're going to get involved in harness racing and you're a passionate fan, you want to know where the good horses are racing, and you want to follow it Australia-wide.
Yeah,
probably Australasia.
True, 100%. Sunday's rally, Jace. What do you hope that? What do you hope happens there?
I'm not a rally person. I don't. Look, do
you agree with the word rally in this scenario?
Oh, look, whatever protest rally movement.
Ideas festival.
I hope something works out well.
Constructive discussion.
But I've never been a fan of mob mentality.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this is where it's sad what's happened, because you actually have your delegates. That's what the kindred bodies are. Yeah?
Representatives.
They are supposed to disseminate the information in a constructive, substantive way. But there are a range of reasons why they're so broken and they're so devastated, and then they disseminate the information in a toxic, poisonous way. It has to be, in my opinion. I'm not having a go at any one individual, but I think we'd both agree that does nothing good. We've discussed this for years. I wanted to run a competition at HRV for people to talk about what they loved about the sport, because everyone talks about what's wrong with the sport. There's nothing. The sport's amazing.
Well, within a couple of hours of that being released, the breeding industry had basically collapsed short term, I think, because the amount of people talking about breeding and not breeding this coming season was incredible off the back of that. So, but of course, the Harness Breeders Victoria, Jace, they were one of the signatories of the statement, and so that's their position. That's, they feel their members felt strongly about this, and they put that out there. But
have you watched the GameStop documentaries?
I've watched part of it. Our producer, Eye in the Sky here, Jordan, I know he's a big fan of the games.
So you know what shorting is? Shorting in stock trading.
Tell
Basically,
me.
when you short a stock, you are predicting that it will fail. And the problem is, our own industry is shorting its own stock.
Yeah.
We actually need every soldier on the ground, and always have had every soldier on the ground going out and telling everyone how great the game is.
Yeah.
So it's disappointing. Is it wrong to say that I'm of the belief that things could have been done over the last 2 years. Again, not blaming this administration, but I'm happy to say this, that when I was given the Lebanon SARS, for those who haven't been sacked 13 times like I have, they give you an opportunity to, you've been fed, Nico. They give you an opportunity to define a new position, because your position has been made redundant. It's all crap. But I was very, very happy to leave the full media space and go into a more strategic role. I think part of the issue over the last 18 months has probably been that people have been left not knowing what is the plan. And I'm also a big fan of war documentaries. I just feel like we've given away 100 meters of ground 10 times in a row. So we're now a kilometer behind the line, rather than just packing up, saying, "Oh, that flank's done. We're going to reload and come from a different angle, different approach."
Yeah.
And I think, am I wrong in saying that one of the big things with administrations right across the board in harness racing and racing in general is they are so frightened of the blowback from the industry whenever anything happens?
I think that can happen sometimes in any industry, can't it? And they can be scared to make the decision that they know is right.
Yes.
And we're not. And again, back to the current administration, we're not seeing that here clearly, are we? I mean, they're making very unpopular decisions, and their reasoning for it is because there is no other way that this can go. If you want to have a sustainable industry going forward, here's our plan of how we're going to get it done.
No,
and we haven't seen that plan just yet, by the way, Jace.
No, but I'm actually, I back that.
Agreed.
It just hasn't. If they just disseminated the information a little bit better, and also
I think
been present enough. That's what I wanted to do, is go out there and talk to people so that they knew that it was coming. But we've already, I think those interviews have already outlined, I think, a bigger cut, and then save some money to use to try and really that's what I'm talking about, I guess, in the war analogy, is to reload. Because right now we've just gone back and back and back. And I think that fear from the blowback from the industry, you can't avoid it because we're getting it now anyway. So
when I left, when I moved on from HRV, my last sort of significant project was to build the draft for an engagement plan, Jason. That's something I wanted to see rolled out, the day before. I think we needed to engage better with all the industry bodies, and not just the kindred bodies, by the way. I suggested a young participants body and all sorts of different groups, and just, semi-regular meetings that were all minuted, and just discussing and passing on, information in as transparent a way as possible. I don't know when or if that plan, got launched. My understanding is that there was a bit of time between me leaving and really serious engagement being dialed up. But I will say, I think Matt Isaacs has been pretty engaging with the kindred bodies, from what I hear. Okay, but then it's whether or not that information is being able to get back to the participants. I think that's another question. But then I also think engagement and the level of engagement, scoring that, you've got to do it regularly, you've got to do it openly, and you've got to do it really sincerely. And I think that's something that this was the whole point of the engagement strategy, Jace. If we get that right, then everyone, bad news or good news, at least knows what's coming, and they can all work together to try and fix it.
Well, I'm going to be positive and brutal at the same time here. So I'm just going to say it. Matt Isaacs could easily, when he saw the situation that he'd been left with, have attempted to make an exit strategy within 5 minutes, couldn't he?
Yeah, well, he did, to be fair, call out, I think, quite early, didn't he, that he disagreed with some of the directions of the Trots 24 strategy. I think he made that pretty clear from the get-go.
He could have...
Some elements. There was some great work done there. I'm not that
kind of guy that wants CEO status, right? But if you're a career man like him, you would have looked at it and gone, this doesn't look like it can work out. The longer I stay, the less well this can work out for me. So he
to some degree, except
he could have bounced real early. He just could have gone, I'll tell you what, and then, well, tell me if I'm wrong, but he could have bounced quite early. He does love harness racing. I don't know. Yeah, he does love I don't know whether there are other opportunities, but these people always seem to get other opportunities. He does love harness racing, I think.
He does.
But the error, I think, is somebody like you who loves harness racing and had that depth of knowledge, years of understanding, using you far better. And as I mentioned, I would have been happy. I'm sort of glad I didn't, but I would have been happy to hitch my wagon to him early and just go, let's go out there and let's do some stuff, and let's engage with the industry properly. And the news is not going to be good, but we can make these plans earlier, come up with
Yeah.
the strategies. Because the one thing is, even right now, and I love the fact that he's gone to the kindred bodies to get feedback on strategies of how to go forward with the money that's available.
Yes, agreed.
But the industry has been left bereft of hope and a strategy. For a
Yeah,
fair while.
agreed. I think there needed to be a much better engagement plan. Going back a long way, you'll remember during COVID, Jace, that Dale Brown would bring, the CEO then would bring a lot of different groups into the room for the COVID business continuity discussions. And I think that was a great move. But I think that sort of jazz needed to have been happening for 5-10 years prior and be a regular thing that was always happening in harness racing in Victoria. And every participant that you speak to would say, yes, we agree. Of course, that's how it should be. And on Matt Isaacs using me in that role, that would be a little unfair on him because, of course, I resigned and I didn't give him that opportunity anyway I'd moved on at the time.
I'm not.
So it wasn't his fault that he didn't use me in that role.
No, but I'm not saying not use you in the role, but actually, if we're being honest, elevate your role to the point where that might have been rolled out, and other things might have been rolled out a little bit earlier, because he's looking at who he has available, and he goes, okay, yep. You really, really know. That's just my opinion.
Sure.
The only other quick point.
Yep.
And I've discussed this previously, but I started in an administration that probably never gave out good news to anybody.
Yep.
The only thing that I would say is a little slightly in bad taste is, and Brownie did this, and Mardo did this, and we're still seeing it a little bit. Even earlier, you mentioned we're getting a higher return on our investment for our races run. I almost, tell me if you disagree, I almost think, don't bother saying that. If somebody came to me in a job and said, you're doing an amazing, amazing job, like you've never been better, you're flying, and we're going to cut your salary by a third, I wouldn't hear the first bit. I'd only hear my salary's getting cut. And I also think there is something disturbingly self-serving about saying we're in a terrible situation, but we're doing well.
Yeah, I don't really take it like that. I hear what you're saying, but I mean, the flip side to that argument would be, I think they've been pretty open in saying that there's a lot of cuts that need to be made and prize money needs to be cut.
Why bother promoting what's going good?
Well,
it's going well.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. So let me finish on that point, Jace. It's all easy to go negative. We've got to cut this, we cut that, we've got to cut the prize money, we're going to cut some staff, we've got to do this, that, and the other. Everyone just thinks the industry's going nowhere. But if you're being transparent, you say, well, that's all horrible news. That's terrible news. We've got some really tough times and dark clouds ahead. However, there are some green shoots, because you do need to offer some hope, Jace, if it's there and if it's real. And I don't see why you wouldn't say that. And I don't think they're jumping up and down necessarily. I haven't read it this way anyway, saying, look how good we are that this is happening here while all the negative stuff's happening there. I haven't taken it that way, but that's an opinion thing. Maybe you've taken it differently.
I see a bit, maybe not from the administration, but next door to it.
Yeah, I do think you've got to offer hope though, where there is genuine hope, and if there's genuine hope there,
but maybe it's my thing. One of the quotes that I love hate the most is in a movie from To Die For, with Nicole Kidman. If nobody's watching, why do anything good? Basically, it's almost, or if you're not on TV, does anything really matter? That information, I feel, would be better placed not being out in the public sphere. And certainly not when information of how dire things are isn't going to the actual constituents and the stakeholders. Yeah. I would prefer that you brought them in, they've got the text message service, and let them know, you guys are doing a magnificent job. Yeah. You guys are killing it. We're killing it. But we're all fighting, bring everyone together and go, we're all fighting an invisible force. But I'll tell you what, you guys are killing it out there, what you're doing, and we love what you're doing. And actually bring them in rather than promote positivity there.
Sure.
And then,
I think you make a lot of sense. And look, at the end of the day, this whole issue is highly emotive because unfortunately the game's not flying. It's not. And we are in a really tough storm coming at us.
Yeah.
We can look back, and I think there's been a certain amount of that done, and that's fine. People go looking for answers and this, that, and the other. You can agitate for change, and I think that's okay too, because everyone's entitled to opinions, and you're entitled to go down that path as well. And then you can come together, or you can throw up ideas, or you can take to social media, or you can go to a rally and express your love for the game, or you can get angry and say it's not going well enough. What do we do? There's just so many different ways humans can react, isn't there, Jace? At the end of the day, though, I don't, my question I keep coming back to, and I'd ask the current administration, what's your hope and vision for the future? Okay, what's your plan to give some genuine hope now for the industry going forward? And they've been pretty open, I think, with their releases and saying there's hope that an industry will survive. What the industry looks like might be different to what it is now. And then it's up to you whether you took that answer as, oh, well, bugger it, I don't want to be in that. And that'd be a real shame. But maybe that's just the reality, Jace, that there'll be a certain amount of people who will say that, won't there? Who say, well, it's not for me.
That's inevitable. But
of course. And it's a shame. It's damn sad. But
we are looking forward.
You've got to.
I think my point is that if this information, I think the writing was on the wall, regardless of what happened. I think things have been going okay, and still the writing's on the wall. If this had been done a while back and brought people in then and created the plan a while back, then people would have braced themselves and prepared themselves for what was ahead. Now it just feels like it's just more and more bad news. But basically, the thing for Matt and the administration at HRV, you can be a great coach. What's Alistair Clarkson? What's his record with North Melbourne this year?
Yeah, well,
he's an amazing coach.
Yeah.
Whether you like him as a human being.
Well, exactly.
That doesn't define how well you've done.
Of course it doesn't.
And he obviously cares. You know what? If he didn't care, I think his blue here in giving so much information out of the blue is because he actually cares. He actually does care.
I think he genuinely wants. He genuinely wanted to get that information out to the industry and get some ideas and support.
I reckon if he had the support, like elite support, then I think this could have been done a while back. I can understand from Matt's perspective, having met him and spoken to him on various occasions, that he would genuinely be hurt.
I think so.
At the reaction.
Yep. I think so.
But that is because because he hasn't been at the front of the war, at the front lines for 10 years. These people aren't. They've copped a lot of hits. Yeah, these people have copped a lot of hits as well. I think he absolutely would be disappointed and shattered in the way it's been. The response has been after bringing the group together. But equally, I want to say that I can also understand the other side of it. I've said that a few times. I can understand the anger for the situation the sport finds itself in. I just think that when that happens, Jace, that too often people will go looking for someone to blame. Rather than the overall situation, which is that maybe the sport does need to make a few changes to stop spending more money than it has. But don't you reckon that that's even a relic of the past? The thing is, when you've been told, when your girlfriend's come home 9 times and she said, oh, I didn't get home last night for this reason, that reason, the other reason, you're like, you're definitely cheating on me, right? They've been told so many different reasons why they keep getting hit. I think it's so hard. I can understand. I can't believe they're still standing up.
They're very resilient.
But I think they're now at the point where they're like, I'm not even listening to the excuse, because other people over the years have told them it's because of the TAB agreement. It's because of it's because of this. It's because of the race fields. So it's very hard for them to hear the legitimate reasons.
Of course.
Can we get stuck into votes and?
Yeah, we will. Let's be quick. I know you've got to jump off and make a quick call. Let's quickly do the votes, Jace. Who'd you give the 3-2-1 last week?
I think we're in the same boat, but I've gone completely in opposition to normal. Instead of the small players. Jess Tubbs, 3 votes.
Yep.
I give it to Greg.
Metro leading trainer.
And deservedly so. 2 for Emma Stewart.
Metro second leading trainer.
I mean, we've been pretty good at it.
No, we have. I'm joking. I'm just stirring you
We're
up.
leaders now. And one for a man who I've given a slap over the jowls a couple of times. Connor Clark. I wasn't with Ghost of Time. I can't seem to find my black bookers to make money out of them, but he did it a different way. And he did it well. So could have been Lofty, could have been Stephen Loftus, but I went with Connor Clark. What about you, Codes?
I couldn't really. Jess and Emma, I thought terrific from both, but then I couldn't not give Connor Clark 2. So one of them was going to miss out in the end. Emma's missed out by getting 1. Jess gets the 3. And I've given Connor Clark 2 purely because I thought he must be thinking, geez, J-Bond's called me a bit one-dimensional out there, and I'm going to try something different. And he nailed it. So 2 for Con. He's a terrific driver.
Who's your black booker?
Good young fella too. My black book is Magnetic Terror. Had absolutely no luck whatsoever. And he's flying and he's drawn really well this weekend.
Wish we were starting the form straight away. It's led me in a little bit with the main
Hello.
whole marking draw Saturday night. I went with a Western District hero.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting a lot from Kowalski Analysis. Didn't show its phenomenal, crazy gate speed, knowing that Soho Historia and Jillaby Jack Sparrow were in the race. But tell you what, it was a nice return from a horse we know has got enormous ability. Now, I'm not privy to the issues that it might have. And who knows, it might stand out for 3 runs and we don't get a win out of it. But I tell you what, I like the run. And also Earl of Pembroke was in the race.
Terrific. Yeah. Again, well, he was your black booker last time. So, and my black booker 4 or 5 weeks ago or 6 weeks ago was Kowalski Analysis, and it's only had the 1 run since. So we've both got that in the black book. I'm loving these joint black bookers we've got because they tend to go out and win, Jason. Let's be
it's very good. I might just give you my money. Can I just send you some cash, and then when the joint black bookers come up, you just back them for me because I keep